فتنا كتير على مطاعم واكلنا اويسترز بياخدوا العقل. اطيب من كتير اويسترز اكلتهم بالعالم. وكنا عم نسال طب وين؟ مي مسقعه وين؟ فهمنا انه هون بالامارات في اويسترز. بدبا باي بالفجيره في اويسترز عم بينحكى فيهم بالعالم، بالحجم، بالشكل، بالطول، بالغمق واكثر بكتير من هيك. قدرنا نوصل تنتعرف على الاونرز وين بيشتغلوا، شو بيعملوا، ومن هون بالفجيره كيف الاويسترز بيروحوا على كل مطاعم الامارات and beyond. The whole process how it's made ببلش هلا.
My name is Ramie Murray. I'm the founder and CEO of Dibba Bay Oysters. I'm originally from Scotland, but I moved to the UAE when I was 12 years old, so not so long ago. I dye my hair. We're based in northern Fujairah in beautiful Dibba, which I can't wait to show you. We started in 2016, and we hit the market in 2017. Very, very humble beginnings. I think the first few years we were doing 5,000 oysters a month, 10,000 oysters a month, but I'm very proud to announce that we cracked 500,000 oysters in sales last December, so we've had phenomenal growth. This is the nursery. This is where the oysters begin their journey. So a baby oyster, by the way, fact of the day, baby oysters are called spat. So save that for your quiz. These are baby oysters. So we bring them in at about 1 to 2 millimeters in size. You can see they're perfectly formed oysters, just tiny. Everything we do in the farm is natural. We have no chemicals. We use no antibiotics, nothing. They feed naturally, and if they don't want to feed, they don't want to feed. So all that's happening here is the baby oysters or the spat are in the containers, and we are just pumping seawater through. Unfiltered, just pumping seawater through. You can see the flow coming out of each of these barrels. And so the oysters are then just feeding naturally. Any microalgae that's in the water, they feed from there. So what we're doing here is we're growing them up. We're going to double or triple them in size until they're about sort of 5-6 millimeters. And then we send them out to the ocean. They then spend the next 9 months in the ocean growing, and then we bring them back here to harvest. We transfer them into lantern nets. These are arranged over shelves. We're just spacing them out so that they can all get an even go at the food that's coming in on the currents. And so we just cycle them through different sizes of nets just according to the size of the oyster. So as they get bigger, we'll reduce the density and change the size of the net. Why oysters? Well, I had a passion to be involved in farming. I don't have a background in farming, I don't have a background in aquaculture. I have an entrepreneurial background. I've always started my own businesses. I saw an opportunity for food production. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard all the stats here in the UAE. We import something crazy like 80% of all the food that we consume. Even seafood, even though we're surrounded by the ocean, we still import 70% plus of the seafood that we consume. So I felt as an entrepreneur there was a great opportunity to get involved A, with farming, and then B, with aquaculture, because we're surrounded by the ocean. There was no aquaculture, or very limited aquaculture happening. So I got a positive response from the authorities when I said I want to do this. And what was important for me was, if I was going to get into farming, I wanted it to be sustainable, responsible farming. Because you can grow anything you want in this environment if you throw money at it. But that's not necessarily good for the environment. So what I wanted to do was find a species that perhaps hadn't been tried here before that could work in this environment. So I came at it from a very kind of fresh perspective because I didn't study marine biology and I didn't study aquaculture. So I just had a very clean slate, had a look what might work in these conditions, and I identified oysters. And so, as it turns out, the species of oysters that we're using accounts for 90% of the world's farmed oysters. So it's a very robust species that can withstand a whole big temperature range. The thing is, it hadn't been done here before, primarily because of sort of historically people thought you could only grow oysters in cold water. It turns out that we've got a very unique environment here because although the water is quite warm, it gets very, very deep very, very quickly, so we get an upwelling of cooler water which is full of nutrients and food, which is quite rare that you have this combination. I didn't realize that at the time. I just did a pilot study. So we did a pilot, we did a test, it worked, we went from there. I've then understood since why it worked, and that is the depth of the water and the temperature of the water and the food levels that we have. This is the harvest area. So after they've been out in the ocean for 8-9 months, we then bring them back here to harvest them to send them to market. Now, we have zero wastage because we only harvest when we have an order. So we take our orders, then we go out to sea, we bring them back here, we clean them up, we send them to market. When they come in, they've got all this other marine life that has been growing on them. This is a native pearl oyster that is attached on. You know, I was talking earlier about oyster shells are a perfect substrate for other shellfish. So the native pearl oysters have attached on here. There's barnacles. There's all sorts of life on these. But to send them to market, we've got to scrape this all off, because when you take an oyster out of the water, it closes up and it can last for up to 2 weeks in its own little system with it closed. But everything on the outside of the shell will die, and then it will smell and it doesn't look good, so we have to clean them up. So this is the very manual, annoying part of oyster farming, is that we have to hand clean every individual oyster. This is after it's been cleaned. So we just scrape off all the barnacles and what have you. We're now entering a food production zone. So if you could just put your feet in the wash bath and we'll get some hair nets. And this is a totally separate part of the farm. Once the oysters have been cleaned, they're entering here through this hole in the wall. And then what's happening here is they're getting separated out and they're being individually weighed. So this machine here, each one of those cups is a digital scale, and we're weighing them and we're kicking them out according to, we use the French numbering system actually. So a number 4, it's a range, by the way, it's not a specific weight. So a number 4 is 45 to 65 grams, a number 3 is 65 to 85 grams, a number 2 is 85 to 115 grams. And so the lower the number, the bigger the oyster. The a la carte restaurants want number 2s. We sell a lot of number 1s to the Chinese community here because they like to use them for cooking, and so they want a bigger oyster. So we have demand for all sizes, so we produce all the sizes. So what's happening here is outside, we clean the outside of the shell and then we weigh it. And then what's happening here is we're cleaning the inside of the oyster. Because you eat an oyster whole and it's effectively live when it goes to market. So its food safety is of paramount importance. So what happens here is we fill these tanks with seawater, we then lock it, recirculate it, and we filter that water through UV lights, which sterilizes the water. And then the oysters sit here, and a full-grown oyster will suck 170, 180 liters of water through its body per day. So they're incredible little vacuums. And they're looking for food, but when you put them in the sterilized seawater, they suck that through their bodies, it empties their stomach, it empties their intestines, it cleanses them, it purges them, and it gets them ready for market. And then I'll pick him up and he closes. See? And then he's trapped the seawater inside the shell, and that's his life support system. And that's how they close up and they can survive for a couple of weeks out of the water. Keep them in the fridge, keep them cool, because then they're in hibernation and their metabolism slowed down. But they're incredible creatures. When you have an oyster that's growing very quickly, as it does here, if you just leave an oyster to its own devices, it concentrates about its shell. So it will grow very long and narrow and shallow, which will mean a very low meat content. But what we do is we pull them out and we actually handle them constantly throughout the 9 months. And we break the end of the shell. The end of the shell is called the nail. And so by breaking it, it doesn't hurt the oyster. You break it, you're changing the angle of growth. So instead of the shell growing out, it grows up. And then this creates this deep cup, which then fills up with meat, and then you get this lovely meat to shell ratio, which we have a very high meat to shell ratio, and that's because of all the handling and the fast growth. So the oysters obviously have their 8-9 month growth cycle out in the ocean. Then when we harvest them, we bring them in here, they go in the tanks. They only need about 24 hours to purge, but we hold them for 3 days. And so what we're doing is we're really being super safe from a food safety point of view, but we're also chilling them down, which helps with the shelf life.
Do they continue their growth here? Or
No, because there's no food in the tanks. And so here they're just purging and they're going into hibernation. So we're just cooling them down. So oysters that are coming from Europe tend to be quite grey coloured. And our ones are much whiter. This is due to the chemical makeup and the minerals in the water here. Doesn't affect the taste, it's purely aesthetic. But with the beautiful Hajar Mountains here that run along the coastline, they're limestone. And so you get that dissolving into the ocean and you've got high levels of calcite. The oysters then suck up the water and they get the minerals they need to build their shell from their surroundings. And so they have this lovely white color. So that's just unique to our location.
So usually in Europe, you see the persons handling oysters wearing gloves.
Yeah.
So yours are softer than usual?
Well, because we handle them a lot, they don't have so many sharp edges. So they're quite smooth. So here we have a beautiful oyster. See, it's nice and full.
Big?
And you see the muscle here. Some oysters that are coming out of estuaries that haven't been moved around a lot will have a tiny muscle. Whereas we grow them offshore, so they get buffeted around and they're opening and closing a lot. So we get these big muscles. This is the adductor muscle, which closes and opens the shell. This is the same muscle that you would eat from a scallop. So you know, you eat the little module of meat from a scallop, that's the adductor muscle. So it's the same, and so this is very crunchy and full of protein, and this is what gives the real umami levels to an oyster. So there'll be 2 or 3 grams of protein in just one of these oysters.
Impressive.
And see, this is the very cool thing about oysters from a culinary point of view. What can we taste? We can taste salt, we can taste sweet, we can taste acidity, and we can taste umami. Umami comes from the protein levels, so we've got a nice high umami level. We've got the natural salinity from the ocean water. We've got a nice fat content. This is glycogen, the fat content, the creaminess that you see here. So that gives sweetness. And so with a well-balanced oyster, you get a nice balance of salt, sweet, umami. The only thing missing is the acidity, which is why you have your traditional squeeze of lemon or a bit of vinaigrette. And so What's wonderful about our oysters is the balance. So we have a beautiful balance between all these different elements, and then we also have a wonderful texture. A lot of people don't like oysters because of the texture. It's so gloopy and like, ours are firm and they have a crunch to them. So for first time oyster triers, they're a great option, but also for the connoisseur, because it's a little bit different.
Impressive. Wow. Can it be more detailed than this? Amazing. So do you clean anything after it or just turn it around? And that's it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's personal preference. I like to turn it around just to make sure it's loose. There's nothing worse than getting a shucked oyster and trying to eat it and a little bit is still stuck to the shell and like it's...
And some remove the borders or no?
No, you should leave that's the gills on the outside there. No, you should leave that. And then you can tell it's a lovely fresh oyster because the gills are still curling up there.
And you know an oyster is fresh if you put the lemon on and it just...
Yeah, no, there is a bit of that. So an oyster is fresh when it's alive. So if the oyster is shut, it's alive. And so once you open it, that's why you should consume immediately, because it's not alive anymore. That trick you're talking about with the lemon, it can work if you half open it, and then you put a bit of lemon and it's super awake. But the thing is that our oysters we cool them down and they're hibernating. Okay. So they're not like super active. So if you warmed them up to room temperature and then opened it and put the lemon, you would get that reaction. So, would you like a try?
Yeah. Well textured.
Yeah.
Like a soft piece of meat.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow, different flavors that come in and out here and there. Something that activates the tongue, something that activates the palate. Sea flavor, saltiness. A feel of protein in a way or another. There's something big, like exactly like, I'm not comparing it to a piece of meat, but it has that softness of a rare Wagyu.
Yeah, it has that tenderness.
Yeah.
It's and then of course it sounds almost silly saying this, but you have the ocean freshness. But you get a lot of oysters that'll have like a metallic aftertaste, they'll have an iodine taste. We don't have that. We just have this very pure, fresh ocean taste.
Can I try to open one?
Yeah.
I'm a fan and I love it. So we start from this side or this side?
This side.
This side.
So with an oyster you can open it from the back or the side. I like to open from the side here and you're just severing the muscle. So point the blade away from you. Yeah. And then, I mean, maybe just move your fingers further up so you're just got a little bit of the blade exposed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the muscle's always in the same place. It's about halfway up on this side, so it's here. So you need to sever that muscle there.
So I have to cut it from...
You need to cut down here.
Okay.
Yep, there we go. And then as you peel it back, you don't want to lose the meat that's stuck to the top. So oh yeah, it's come off already. You're good.
And then...
There you go. Yeah, so just quickly, when you first open an oyster, it's totally fine to dump the liquid. So you dump that liquid. You can even run it under the tap if you want to get rid of the bits of shell. But what's very important is what you do next. Because you've cut this side of the muscle, you now need to scrape under and cut the other side of the muscle. Now when you do that, more liquid will be released from inside the body. You don't want to lose that. So now it's released. Now I like to flip it just to make sure it's loose and that it's not going to get stuck.
So all this liquid that wasn't here before?
That's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff.
That's got all the flavor. Fujairah is obviously on the opposite coastline to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Dubai and Abu Dhabi are on the Arabian Gulf, which is a very shallow sea. And so it gets very, very saline and it gets very hot. Whereas across on the Fujairah side, it's actually the tip of the Indian Ocean. And we're on the edge of the continental plate, so it gets very deep, very quickly. You go a few kilometers offshore, it can be 1,000 meters deep. So it's vastly different to the Arabian Gulf. And so it's a totally different ecosystem, and it's quite pristine over here. We don't have lots of heavy industry. We don't have heavy population levels, and so it's rural. There's no rivers running into the ocean. Sounds like a funny thing to say, but most oyster producing areas in the world are in bays which have rivers running into them. And so you have all sorts of pollution coming off of fields, coming out of sewage treatment plants, and so you have a huge issue with that in Europe in particular. So here we don't have rivers. I never thought I'd say that. It's a benefit. We don't have rivers flowing into the ocean. It keeps the ocean nice and pristine here. And as I said, low levels of industry, so there's no like chemical factories or anything like that. So lovely clean water, lovely cool water relative to the Arabian Gulf. And lovely food levels. So you have all this nutrients, you have all this algae, which is what the oysters feed on.
بدي اخبركم انه حرزانه اتس worth it. درايف an hour and a half. حرزانه تسوق من دبي ساعه ونص. اول شيء المناظر حلوين، الجبال حلوين، الصور على الطريق حلوين. بتوصل لهون الطقس بياخذ العقل. Amazing wonderful weather. Amazing outstanding. بتوصل على هذا الشباك من الساعه 8 للساعه 4 ونص بيستقبلوكم. تشتروا دزين 2 3 بسعر كتير منيح. From fork to mouth. Not from farm to fork. وبتقعدوا هون على الصخره بتنبسطوا او على الطاوله اللي ورا. On the table. Yeah, exactly. and you enjoy it. هيدا رح نعمله، رح اخذ دزينه، هيدا هداني اياها. Thank you so much for the gift. رح يصير انا افتح الاويسترز تبعي بكل المطاعم، ورح ننبسط وحده وحده بطعمتها، ورح نحكي فيها بتفاصيلها، رح اخبركم شو عم بحس، شو شكلها، شو هي المصل اللي بقلبها، وكل الفليفرز. نحن اليوم بديبا باي، الباب مفتوح، فيكم تجوا تتعرفوا على الزلمه العظيم، بيفتحكم، بفوتكم، بفرجيكم، بتشتروا دزينه الاويستر، بتاخذوا الاويسترز تبعكم that would last 3 days، بضاينوا 3 ايام عندكم بالبراد، فيكم تاكلوا اويستر at very affordable price at home every day. It's not only restaurant food, and enjoy it. I'm so excited. Let's have a dozen.
All right.
Morning.
Hi.
Thank you. A dozen oyster ready to be devoured.
We hand pack every box of oysters, and so they're all the right way up, and they all have this branded banding on them.
I wanted to ask you about the bandit.
Yeah.
Why
so this is something quite unique to us, and so by applying this band, what it does is it jams the oyster shut, which helps it stay sleeping. So when we put them in the tanks, we're putting them into hibernation, we're cooling them down, and then we apply the band, and then it means that they don't have to expend energy contracting the muscle to stay closed, so therefore it increases shelf life for us. So it helps with shelf life. Also, if the box gets all shaken up and they get turned upside down or on their side, if they were unbanded, they might open and all the water drains out and then they start to die. So what you are able to do here is you can come and buy a box of oysters from our farm shop, and you can bring it out here and just sit on the picnic bench and open them yourselves, or they can shuck them for you if you're feeling lazy, you know.
It's part of the joy and the adventure of opening, preparing your food.
Yeah.
And it gets easier with time. Done. Remove the water, turn around, lap, and yep.
Yeah.
Do you do a personal tasting every time you taste one? Is
Yeah.
it good?
Yeah.
Mussels, protein.
Yeah.
Saltiness.
No, I like to taste them as often as possible.
Anyone's better than others? Any season different?
No, there is a seasonality to them because there's different food in the water at different times of year. This time of year they tend to be the sweetest because they've got quite a high fat content. And then in the summer there's less food in the water, so the fat content goes down, so they get a bit less sweet. But then that also brings out other flavors that are being masked by the sweetness. So
if you want to take them with me abroad, probably a foam box with ice.
Yeah.
Easy?
Yeah.
Goes on the plane?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's how we export them. So we'll have them in their wooden boxes, and then we've just got them packed into the styro, and that's how we export.
How do you suggest eating them? Would it be better enjoyed raw, cooking? What would be your...
Me, personally, I'm not that fussy. I like a variety. I eat quite a lot of oysters. So if there's a new sauce or a new way to enjoy them, I'm in. So we have them. We have 6 different types of cooked oysters in our restaurant in Dubai. We use sort of Indian spices or Thai spices. We do traditional French with blue cheese and garlic, and so as long as you don't overcook them.
Let's talk about your restaurant. So you have a shop and a restaurant, and the restaurant serves oysters and other things.
Yes, yeah. So we've got two in Dubai. We've got one in Jumeirah, in Sukim 1 Harbour, and that is our main farm shop. So that there you can go, you can buy oysters for takeaway, take them home. You can order on Deliveroo from there, shucked oysters for takeaway. And we have a limited menu of other items, all local. We're actually very proud. We just won Sustainable Kitchen of the Year GCC at the BBC Good Food Awards just the other night. Perfect. Because all the other ingredients we have in our menu, it's all local. So it's locally grown tomatoes, it's burrata, it's locally baked bread, everything is just from local. Now in other parts of the world, that's not such a big deal. But in the UAE, where the majority of things are imported, it is actually quite a big deal, managing to have your entire menu with local ingredients.
I love the flavor of the sea without having that iodine or iode thing. It feels natural, it tastes natural, and I'm a big fan. You have a new fan, let me tell you, and I'm enjoying it. I'll get better at opening them.
Practice makes perfect. I'll give you a few boxes to take away. You've got your knife. You can practice at home.
Ramie, thank you so much for your trust again. Thank you for the support. Thank you for all your time, energy, smile, passion, and everything in between. And if you live in the UAE or anywhere else in the world, know that this amazing country of ours that has welcomed both of us and all of the expats has great things to offer, and we're fans of their produce. I've been to farms of tomatoes, figs, the UAE exports raspberry and so on and so forth, and now oysters, which used to be known as being imported from Europe. Wow. It's breakfast time.
If you're feeling lazy or you're worried about you losing a finger, you can come here and you can actually order shucked oysters from the farm shop, and then we'll serve them up for you.
Getting better at it.
I know you're gonna. This is no judgment on your shucking ability. We're just saying what's also available.
I'm coming all the way from Dubai to taste the famous Dibba oysters, where they come from.
What's unique about our oysters is pretty much the speed of growth. So, as I said, we're using the same species which is used all over the world, which is the Pacific cupped oyster. This oyster was originated from Japan, China area. It was introduced to Europe in the 60s, and it's now the dominant species in Europe. So the main oysters that you get out of France, they're Pacific cupped oysters or Japanese oysters. They can taste and look completely different because oysters are filter feeders, so they're a product of their environment. But the particular species that we're using, in France it'll take at least 3 years to grow to market size. Here we get it in 8 months. So we have a vastly faster growth cycle. So that's an advantage we have. It's also a disadvantage because the oysters grow quickly, but so does everything in the ocean. So the seaweed that clogs the nets, the snails, the crabs, the predators that affect the oysters, they all grow really fast as well. So it's very manual, very intensive process that we have. But by handling the oysters a lot, we can affect the shape of them. So we tumble them, which hardens their shell, and it encourages a nice deep cup. So we have a nice high meat content. It's also a very tender but firm meat because it's not an old animal. It is fairly young, so it's tender, but it's still big because it's grown so fast in these conditions. So we have a lovely benefit of a high meat ratio, a lovely texture, and a beautiful taste. From other parts of the world, you can have like a medium-sized oyster will be 2 to 3 years old, and you get a large oyster, which can be up to 5 years old. whereas our medium and big oysters are maybe 8 months old and 11 months old. So there's hardly any difference in the age. So even our big oysters are still quite tender. We're the first and only oyster farm in the region. There's other pearl farms, but we're for edible oysters, we're the only one. We now have about a 40% market share in the UAE, and we're also exporting. So we've joined the ranks of exports. It's oil, dates, and us, I think.
Ah,
So-
that's it.
It's quite useful, the oyster shell. You can grind it up and use it in chicken feed. You can use it in fertilizer. You can use it in construction materials. But what we've chosen to do is we've looked at what we can do to help the local environment here. So when an oyster grows, when it builds its shell, it's actually sequestering carbon. So we're automatically carbon positive. Like, we're good for the environment just simply by farming oysters. It's one of the only food sources which is environmentally positive to grow. And so we have that in our back pocket, but we're taking it a step further and we're collecting shells back from restaurants. And what we're doing is we have an area off the coastline here designated for an oyster reef. Because when oysters in the wild breed, they birth little larvae that float through the column, and they start growing their own shell, and they immediately look for an old oyster shell to attach onto. That's their preferred substrate. So what we're doing is we're doing a whole big area off the coast here where we're putting down bags of oyster shells, used oyster shells from our restaurants, and then the native oysters, the pearl oysters and the scallops and the mussels and everything are then jumping on that, and it's becoming a self-sustaining natural oyster reef, which is a wonderful thing to do because oyster reefs are the foundation of every marine environment. So you build an oyster reef, everything goes from there. The coral then grows in it. Coral growing on oyster shells grows 30% faster than if it's stuck on a rock. So we are encouraging native oysters, and we're encouraging coral growth, and then everything just builds from there. Then you've just got a marine environment, and then you've got the shrimp in there, you've got the fish in there, everything just builds from there.
Welcome to Dibba Bay Oysters. We're gonna go offshore now. We're gonna check one of our farms. We have 3 farms. So the first one here, right straight ahead over there, is called Fairmont Farm. It's our deepest farm, and we usually use it, most of it as well, in the summertime. And I'll explain a little bit once we get there. So this is our barge named Mahar. We have 2 of those, and this boat is used for farming on the sea with the oysters, lifting the lines, spraying, collecting, hanging, transportation of the oysters, especially the lanterns. So we have a crane that picks up the line, put it on these star wheels, and then the crew takes the lanterns to the boat and do their job there.
Ready, ready, ready. Ready and very excited. Super ready.
This is what we call a Fairmont Farm, one of our 3 farms here. This one is our deepest farm. We got about 39 lines over here, millions of oysters. And as of now, you can see over there those 2 boats. Those are diving boats. They are working on a few lines At the moment we had some bad weather the last few days, so they are fixing what needed to be fixed. You have 10 meters under the water, there is a line, and then you have lanterns hanged on those lines.
So the lanterns are 10 meters under.
Yeah, a 10-meter level, and then you have lanterns.
شو هالنهار علمني كتير. هالنهار علمني قديش الطبيعة فيها تعطي، بس الطبيعة بتعطي ساعة اللي نحن بنعطيها، الطبيعة بتعطي ساعة نهتم فيها، الطبيعة بتعطي بلاش ساعة اللي نحن بنهتم فيها وما بنكب لها بحر، ما بنوسخها. اليوم تعلمت انه قادرين نعمل اويسترز وغيره، ساعة احنا كنا مفكرين انه بس موجودين بالمي المسقعة، بمي مش كتير مسقعة، ببلد ما كان منتظر بحياته يكون عنده اويستر. من هون تعلمت انه البلد ساعة بيفتح لكم فرص تاخدوها. هالبلد العظيم الرائع اللي بحبه كتير وبعدنا عم نغرم فيه اكتر واكتر واكتر، الامارات يلي عطيت فرصة لهالزلمة رامي وخلته يفتح اويستر. اليوم 500,000 اويستر بالشهر، اكثر من 50 موظف، 6-7 بطويات، وموجود. ومش بس الامارات، عم بيوزع لوين ما كان، والامارات بتفتخر بكل مطاعمها انه صار عندها اويستر. اليوم تعلمت انه بالايمان بتكفي، بايمان بارضك، بوطنك، بالمحبه وبالشغل كلنا مع بعضنا. الدوله بتساعدك، انت بتساعد حالك، بنعطي لبعضنا، بنشتري من بعضنا، بنشتري من هون وما بنجيب من برا، وغيره وغيره وغيره. اليوم تعلمت قديش هالعالم بيعقد وقديش في فرص بتاخد العقل مخبيه ساعة كلنا بنحط ايدينا بايدين بعضنا وبنشتغل. اليوم تعلمت انه هذا البلد بحبه كتير، بلد الفرص، بيخليني احلم. كنت دايما اقول ليش الامارات؟ لانه بتخليني احلم. اليوم تعلمت انه فيك تحلم اكثر، فيك توصل اكثر، وشو في opportunities yet to be discovered. نهار رائع من اويستر رائعة 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 رائعة، 10/10 ولا غلطة، بانفستمنت خوات، باشياء جنون. ما رح طول عليكم واقول لكم ان شاء الله رح نكفي نصور قد ما بنقدر. هالميشن نيتشر ان شاء الله مارك كان معي، كنا صورنا بعد اشياء اكثر بكتير ببلد كنا نطلع فيه ونقول رمل صحراء وشوب. It's today the center of the world. Very proudly filming in it. Thank you. I cannot say more than thank you. Thank you so much.
So welcome.
May God be with you. I'm sure you're going to grow and expand. Hopefully people will come more. Hopefully we'll come back for a restaurant experience, sit with you, spend more time, and that people understand the beauty of the sea and the marvels of the sea. And what's happening around, and what we learned today is how much and how can we harvest all this natural beauty into some things that are natural. It smells good. I didn't even wash my hand. Simple water, and everything's so neat.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. The next experience will be at the restaurant with some Lebanese wines, as I heard.
Yeah.
Thanks and good luck.
Thank you.
وهيك بتخلص القصة من فجيرة ساعتين زمان، او اذا بدكم تسوقوا لهونيك بتجوا دغري هون على دبي على JBR وبتاكلوا اويسترز غير شكل. اويستر ديبا باي، بتقعدوا هون على البحر، الهوايات روعة ان كان بالشتاء وان كان بالصيفية. نبيد، الكحول، بيرة anything you want. ومش بس هيك، عندهم سالمون made in UAE من عند بسيلة، وعندهم كمان الاويسترز العظيمين. كل القياسات 2 3 4 البت كونيه، دقت الكبار دقت الاصغر، انبسطت بلوبستر. It was a memorable dinner. بتعرفوا صرت افهم الاويستر، صرت استلذ بالاويستر، صرت افهم ليش عم تعلق او لا، ليش عم بحس باللحمه او لا، ليش في ميت، ليش في بروتين. عم برجع افهم. It was a memorable experience، وان شاء الله تكونوا انتم انبسطتوا من الاول للاخر. وهلا كل مره بتاكلوا اويستر بتصيروا تقولوا استرالي، اوروبي، مين، فرنساوي او اماراتي، وانتم بتقرروا اي بتفضلوا. Enjoy it.